Hi, I'm Emily, 32, a mom who poured her heart into her daughter Lily's second birthday. Picture our Virginia backyard balloons bobbing, fairy lights twinkling, and Lily's giggle as I set out her homemade cake. I'd stayed up late crafting a banner, each letter a promise of a perfect day. But then my sister Abigail stood up, her laugh slicing through the joy, and made an announcement that turned my world upside down. Have you ever had a family moment stolen share where you're watching from, and please like and subscribe to hear how I faced this betrayal? The backyard hummed with chatter, kids chasing bubbles across the grass. I was slicing Lily's cake, her chubby fingers grabbing at the frosting, when Abigail clinked her lemonade glass. Everyone turned. My sister stood, cheeks flushed, her sundress catching the late afternoon light. I figured she'd toast Lily, maybe say something sweet. Instead, she grinned wide and said, "I'm 12 weeks pregnant, due in spring. I wanted you all to know first." The crowd erupted, aunts and cousins rushing to hug her. I froze, knife mid-cut, as Lily tugged my sleeve unnoticed. My mother Margaret was already at Abigail's side, gushing about grandbabies. "So wonderful," she said, "a blessing for us all." I forced a smile, nodding like I was thrilled, but my chest tightened. This was Lily's day. I'd spent weeks planning, from the piñata to the playlist. Now guests were passing around ultrasound photos Abigail had tucked in her purse, cooing over blurry shapes. "Look at that little bean," my cousin Hannah said, holding one up. I wanted to scream. "What about my daughter?" Ethan caught my eye from across the yard, balancing a tray of juice boxes. He mouthed, "You okay?" I shrugged, not trusting my voice. I didn't want to make a scene, not with Lily watching. She was clapping, mimicking the adults, but her eyes searched for me, confused. I knelt beside her, whispering, "Let's cut your cake, sweetheart." She beamed, but the moment felt stolen, like someone had dimmed the sun. Rachel, my best friend since college, noticed. She swooped in, clapping her hands. "Who's ready for pin the tail on the donkey?" she called, herding kids toward the game. A few guests followed, but most stayed glued to Abigail, asking about names and cravings. I caught Margaret's glance, expecting her to redirect things. Instead, she patted Abigail's arm, saying, "You're glowing, honey." My throat burned. Why couldn't she see Lily's day slipping away? I remembered a spring afternoon when I was 10, practicing for my piano recital. I'd worked months on a Chopin piece, my fingers aching from practice. The night of the show, Abigail, barely 7, decided to sing a made-up song during my performance. The audience laughed, charmed, and my notes faded into her giggles. Margaret had clapped loudest for her, not me. That old sting resurfaced, now sharp as ever. I busied myself with the cake, cutting uneven slices, trying to shake it off. Abigail wasn't a kid anymore. She knew what she was doing. I overheard her telling my Aunt Diane I just had to share it here. "It's family." My grip tightened on the knife. Family didn't mean hijacking someone else's moment. I wanted to pull her aside, ask why she couldn't wait a day, but guilt stopped me. A baby was big news. Was I being petty? Ethan slid beside me, setting down the tray. "She could have picked another time," he muttered, keeping his voice low. I nodded, grateful he saw it too. "Let's just get through this," I whispered back. I didn't want Lily sensing my hurt. Rachel's game was in full swing now, kids squealing as they pinned tails on the poster. I carried a slice of cake to Lily, who was sitting on a blanket, her party dress smeared with frosting. "Happy birthday, my love," I said, kissing her forehead. She grinned, oblivious to the shift in the air. But I wasn't. Abigail's laugh rang out again, drawing eyes. She was holding court, passing out more ultrasound photos, each one a tiny claim on my daughter's spotlight. Margaret joined in, saying, "This baby's going to have Abigail's eyes, I bet." I looked at Lily, her curls bouncing as she nibbled her cake, and felt a quiet resolve settle in. I wouldn't let this moment define her day. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Abigail's announcement wasn't just an interruption. It was the start of something bigger, something that would test every ounce of my strength. The party dragged on, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows across the yard. I busied myself collecting paper plates, avoiding Abigail's orbit. Her voice carried bright and relentless as she answered questions about her due date and nursery plans. I caught snippets pastel colors a crib by the window. My stomach twisted. Lily's nursery had those things built with love over months. I shook my head, telling myself it was just talk. She wouldn't cross that line. Would she? Rachel found me by the trash bin, her brow furrowed. "You're too quiet," she said, tossing a napkin in. "Want me to spill punch on her dress?" I laughed, but it came out hollow. "I'm fine," I lied, glancing at Lily, who was now chasing a balloon with a neighbor's kid. Rachel didn't buy it. "She's always been like this, you know," she said, lowering her voice. Center of attention. "Remember your graduation?" I nodded, the memory stinging. Abigail had shown up in a flashy red dress, stealing eyes from my cap and gown. I'd brushed it off then, but now it felt like a pattern I couldn't ignore. I turned to check on Ethan, who was stacking chairs, his jaw tight. He'd overheard Abigail telling my Uncle Ray she might need a bigger place soon. Her apartment's too small for a baby, she'd said, like it was obvious. Ethan's eyes met mine, and I knew he was thinking of our home, the one we'd saved for years to buy. I forced myself to focus on Lily, tying a stray balloon to her wrist so it wouldn't float away. Her giggle eased the knot in my chest, but only for a moment. As guests started leaving, my mother approached, her floral scarf fluttering. "Wasn't that wonderful news?" she said, her smile wide. "Abigail's going to be such a great mom." I swallowed hard, searching for words that wouldn't start a fight. "Yeah, it's big," I managed. "But what about Lily's party?" Margaret's smile faltered, then recovered. "Oh, honey, she's 2. She won't remember." My heart sank. Lily might not, but I would. I'd remember every second of this day being overshadowed. I looked over at Abigail, now posing for photos with my Aunt Diane, holding an ultrasound picture like a trophy. A few guests lingered, offering final congratulations. I wanted to shout that this was my daughter's birthday, not a baby shower. Instead, I carried Lily inside, her eyelids drooping. "Let's get you cleaned up," I whispered, brushing crumbs from her cheek. The kitchen was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. I set Lily on the counter, wiping her hands with a damp cloth, and felt the weight of the day settle in. Ethan joined me, shutting the door softly. "That was bold even for her," he said, keeping his voice low. Announcing it now, I knotted my throat tight. "It's not just the announcement," I said. "It's how everyone acted like Lily didn't matter." Ethan pulled me into a hug, his flannel shirt warm against my cheek. "We'll make it up to her," he said. I clung to that promise, but doubt crept in. What if Abigail's news was just the beginning? Rachel poked her head in, carrying a stack of gift bags. "Need a hand?" she asked, then lowered her voice. "Your mom's out there planning Abigail's baby registry already." I groaned, rubbing my temples. "Of course she is," I said. Rachel hesitated, then added, "I heard Abigail mention your house. Something about how it's got room for a nursery." My blood ran cold. She wouldn't dare, I thought, but the seed of worry took root. I'd spent months painting Lily's nursery, choosing every detail from the soft gray walls to the rocking chair by the window. It was ours, not hers. I tucked Lily into her high chair with a sippy cup, trying to stay calm. But my mind raced. Abigail had always pushed boundaries, taking what she wanted with a smile. When we were kids, she'd borrow my favorite books and return them dog-eared. In high school, she'd worn my prom dress without asking, claiming it looked better on her. I'd let it slide, wanting peace. But this was different. This was my daughter's space, my family's home. As I swept the kitchen floor, I overheard Margaret outside, her voice carrying through the open window. "Abigail needs support now," she was saying to Diane. "Emily's got so much. She can share." My broom stopped mid-sweep. "Share what?" "My home. My daughter's joy." The words lit a spark of anger I couldn't douse. I looked at Lily, her tiny hand clutching her balloon, and felt a fierce need to protect her. Abigail's announcement wasn't just a moment stolen. It was a warning. She wanted more, and my family was ready to give it to her. I didn't know how far she'd go, but I knew I couldn't let her take anything else from us. The week after Lily's party passed in a blur of diaper changes and work emails. But Abigail's announcement gnawed at me. I kept picturing her passing out those ultrasound photos, my mother's glowing pride. I tried to focus on Lily reading her bedtime stories in the nursery, but Rachel's warning about Abigail eyeing our house lingered. I told myself it was just talk. Then on a rainy Tuesday evening, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Abigail, Margaret, and my father George standing on my porch, their coats dripping. I invited them in, my stomach nodding. Ethan was upstairs putting Lily to bed, leaving me to face them alone. Abigail wasted no time striding into the living room like she owned it. "This place is so spacious," she said, running her hand along the couch. "Perfect for a growing family." I frowned, offering them tea to keep my hands busy. Margaret settled into an armchair, her purse clutched tight, while George stood by the window looking uneasy. "We need to talk," Margaret said, her voice firm. "About Abigail's situation." I nodded, pouring hot water into mugs, bracing myself. Abigail plopped onto the couch, her eyes scanning the room. "I've been thinking," she said. "Your nursery is gorgeous. It's exactly what I need for my baby." My hand froze on the kettle. What I said, my voice sharper than I meant. She leaned forward, undeterred. "It's got that big window, all that space. My apartment's a shoebox. You guys can afford another house, right?" I set the kettle down hard, the clank echoing. "That nursery is Lily's," I said. "We built it for her." Abigail shrugged like it was no big deal. "Kids don't need fancy rooms. She'll be fine in something smaller." My pulse raced. I glanced at Margaret, expecting her to intervene, but she nodded. "Abigail's right," she said. "She's starting from scratch. You've got so much already, Emily. It's only fair to help." Fair, the word stung. I'd spent months designing that nursery painting, a forest mural with deer and owls. Each stroke a promise to Lily. I remembered sitting in the rocking chair pregnant, imagining her first nights there. Now they wanted to hand it over like it was nothing. George cleared his throat, finally speaking. "Family steps up," he said. "Remember when Abigail helped you move into your first apartment? You owe her." I stared at him, my cheeks burning. "That was years ago," I said, "and she borrowed my car for a month after." He looked away, fidgeting with his glasses. Margaret jumped in, her voice softening but insistent. "Think of the baby, Emily. Abigail needs stability. You're settled. You can make it work." I gripped the counter, my knuckles white. They weren't just asking. They were demanding. Abigail stood, heading for the hallway. "Can I see it again?" she asked, already moving toward the nursery. I followed, my heart pounding as she pushed the door open. She stepped inside, touching the mural I'd painted. "This is so neutral," she said, like she was already redecorating in her head. "It'll be perfect for my little one." I wanted to shove her out, to lock the door and keep her away from Lily's space. Instead, I stood frozen, my voice caught in my throat. "This isn't happening," I said, my voice low. "Lily's not losing her room." Abigail turned, her smile fading. "Don't be selfish," she said. "You've got everything. A house, a husband, a kid. I'm trying to build that too." Her words cut deep, twisting my anger into something raw. Selfish, I'd given up so much for this family, from covering Abigail's rent in college to hosting every holiday. And now this Margaret stepped closer, her hand on my arm. "Let's not fight," she said. "We just want what's best for everyone." But her eyes were on Abigail, not me. I pulled away, my chest tight with betrayal. They were already imagining a new grandchild erasing Lily's place. I glanced at Ethan, his footsteps creaking on the stairs, and prayed he'd stay out of this. I didn't want him dragged into their ambush. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but my hands shook with the fire of their demands, and I knew this wasn't over. It was about to get uglier. Ethan appeared in the nursery doorway, his flannel sleeves rolled up, hair mussed from tucking Lily in. "What's going on?" he asked, his eyes narrowing at Abigail's hand on the mural. I opened my mouth, but Margaret spoke first. "We're discussing family support," she said, her tone sharp. "Abigail needs a proper space for her baby." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent, his gaze flicking to me. I knew he was holding back, not wanting to escalate things in front of my parents. Abigail turned to him, her voice syrupy. You get it right? This house is huge. You could move Lily to the guest room. It's cozy enough. I felt my blood boil. Cozy. The guest room was a cramped box with one window stacked with old books and a creaky daybed. Lily deserved her bright, airy nursery, not a storage closet. I stepped forward, my voice shaking. This isn't your call, Abigail. This is our home. She rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. You're making this harder than it needs to be, Emily. I'm not asking for your whole house. Just one room. Margaret nodded, her lips pursed. You've always been so protective of your things, she said. Remember when you wouldn't share your toys as a kid? I stared at her, stunned. Toys. This was my daughter's sanctuary, not some plastic doll I'd hoarded at 6. George shifted his hands in his pockets. Let's be practical, he said. Abigail's got no space. You've got options. Sell this place if it's too much. Get something smaller. My heart pounded. Sell our home. The one we'd scraped together, every penny, for the one where I'd brought Lily home from the hospital. I pictured our first night here, Ethan and I eating pizza on the floor, dreaming of our future. Now my own father was suggesting I toss it away. I turned to Ethan, hoping he'd say something, but he was staring at the floor, his fists clenched. I knew he was furious, but he hated family fights after years of his own parents' favoritism toward his brother. I felt alone, cornered in my own house. Abigail wandered to the rocking chair, sitting down like she was testing it. This is perfect, she said, rocking gently. I could nurse here. My vision blurred with anger. That chair was where I'd soothed Lily through colic, singing lullabies until dawn. Margaret sighed, standing beside Abigail. You're young, Emily. You can start over. Abigail's at a delicate stage. I felt a stab of betrayal. Delicate, I'd worked full-time through my pregnancy, managed a toddler while Ethan pulled overtime. Where was their concern for me? Then I wanted to scream, but my voice came out low, cracked. You're choosing her over Lily. Over me. Abigail's eyes flashed. Don't make me the villain, she said. I'm trying to give my kid a good start. You had your turn. My turn, motherhood, wasn't a cue. I thought of all the times I'd bitten my tongue, like when Abigail crashed my bridal shower with her breakup drama, or when she forgot to invite me to her college graduation. I'd always let it go, thinking family meant forgiveness. But this was different. This was theft. George stepped forward, his voice softer. We're not against you, Emily. We just want everyone to be okay. But his eyes avoided mine, and I knew he'd already picked a side. Margaret added, You'll understand when you see Abigail's baby. It changes everything. I felt sick. They were already imagining a new grandchild erasing Lily's place. I glanced at Ethan, his silence louder than any words. I needed him to back me up, but he was trapped in his own memories of being overlooked. Abigail stood brushing her hands together. I'll give you a week to think it over, she said, like she was doing me a favor. But I'm serious about this room. I need it. She walked out of the nursery, Margaret and George trailing her. I stood rooted, the air heavy with their words. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low. They can't make us do this. But it wasn't about force. It was about betrayal, about my family dismantling my world piece by piece. As their car pulled away, I leaned against the nursery wall, the mural's owls staring back. I didn't know how to fight this, but I knew I was running out of time. 2 weeks after Abigail's ambush in my nursery, I sat at my parents' dining table, the smell of pot roast heavy in the air. Margaret had called it a family discussion, but the tension felt like a trial. Ethan sat beside me, his hand on my knee under the table, grounding me. Lily was with Rachel for the night, a small mercy. Across from us, Abigail sipped iced tea, a baby name book open in front of her, pages marked with sticky notes. George carved the roast, his knife scraping the platter, while Margaret fussed with napkins, avoiding my eyes. We need to settle this, Margaret said, her voice clipped as she passed the mashed potatoes. Abigail's situation isn't changing. I gripped my fork, my appetite gone. I'd spent days replaying their nursery demand, each memory sharpening my anger. Ethan and I had barely slept, whispering late into the night about how to protect our home. I'd hoped this dinner might bring clarity, but the air felt charged like a storm about to break. Abigail flipped a page in her book, circling a name with a pen. "I've been thinking about logistics," she said, not looking up. "I could move in by next month. The nursery's ready. So it's just a matter of shifting Lily's stuff." My breath caught. Shifting Lily's stuff, like her crib, her stuffed animals. Her whole world were just clutter. Ethan's hand tightened on my knee, but I shook my head slightly, signaling him to stay quiet. I needed to hear how far they'd go. Margaret nodded, setting down her glass. "We've worked out a plan," she said. "Abigail moves in, you rearrange for Lily. It's simple." My heart pounded. Simple? They were rewriting my life like it was a chore list. I opened my mouth, but George spoke first, his voice low. "We even talked to a realtor friend, Emily. If sharing the house is too hard, you could sell. Downsize. It'd be easier for everyone." I stared at him, my fork clattering to the plate. Sell our home. The one we'd painted, furnished, made ours. The one where Lily took her first steps. Abigail looked up, her eyes bright. "It's not like you're losing anything," she said. "You and Ethan are set. I'm the one starting over. I need this more than Lily does." Her words hit like a slap. Need? She didn't need my daughter's room. She wanted it, and my parents were paving the way. I glanced at Ethan, his face rigid, but he stayed silent, his own family wounds keeping him cautious. I felt a surge of loneliness sitting among my own blood, yet utterly unseen. Margaret leaned forward, her voice softening. "We're not trying to hurt you," she said. "But Abigail's baby deserves a good start. You'll see that when you hold it." I felt sick. They were already imagining this new grandchild erasing Lily's place in their hearts. I thought of every sacrifice I'd made for this family, hosting Thanksgivings, driving Abigail to job interviews, staying silent when they praised her over me. Now they were asking me to give up my home, my daughter's security for her. Abigail tapped her pen on the book, circling another name. "I'm thinking Emma for a girl," she said, like we were chatting about weather. "It's classic, right?" I stared at the book, its pages a smug declaration of her takeover. She wasn't just planning for her baby. She was planning to rewrite my life. My chest tightened, a flood of memories rushing in, Abigail interrupting my wedding toast with her own speech, her tears stealing my graduation spotlight, her constant need to be the center. I'd always swallowed my hurt, thinking that's what sisters do. But this was theft. I pushed my chair back, my voice trembling. "You've planned this without me," I said. "You're deciding my life. Lily's life, like we don't matter." Abigail's eyes widened, her pen pausing. "Don't be dramatic," she said. "I'm just asking for help." Margaret sighed, folding her napkin. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, Emily. We're family." I laughed, bitter and raw. Family doesn't demand someone's home and call it love." George set down his knife, his face tired. "Let's calm down," he said. "We're trying to find a solution." But his words felt hollow, like he'd already signed off on Abigail's plan. I looked around the table at the faces I'd trusted my whole life and saw strangers. They weren't here to discuss. They'd come to enforce. My hands shook, rage and grief colliding. I stood my chair, scraping the floor, and felt the room close in. This wasn't just about a nursery anymore. It was about who I was, who Lily was, and whether we'd ever matter to them. My words hung in the air, sharp and final, but the room didn't pause. Abigail's eyes glistened, her voice rising. "You're jealous, Emily," she said, slamming her baby name book shut. "You've always hated sharing the spotlight." My jaw dropped. Jealous I'd spent my life stepping aside for her, from missed recitals to forgotten birthdays. I looked to Margaret, desperate for her to see the lie, but she shook her head, her lips tight. "Stop this," she said. "You're embarrassing yourself." Embarrassing myself. The accusation burned, peeling back years of silence. I turned to George, my voice cracking. "Dad, you know that's not true. Tell her." He fidgeted with his watch. his silence louder than any words. Abigail leaned forward, her tone venomous. "You got the big house, the perfect family. Let me have something." Her words twisted the knife, painting me as the greedy one, the sister who'd hoarded happiness. Margaret stood her chair creaking and pointed at me. "You've never understood sacrifice," she said. "When I was your age, I gave up my dreams for you girls. And now you can't give one room." My throat closed. Sacrifice. I'd worked nights to pay for this house, nursed Lily through fevers, built a life from scratch. Yet here I was, the villain in their story. Ethan's hand found mine, squeezing hard, but even his touch couldn't dull the sting. Abigail's tears spilled over, her voice breaking. "I thought you'd be happy for me," she said, clutching the book to her chest. "I'm scared. Okay, I need this." The room softened for her, Margaret rushing to her side, murmuring comfort. I stood frozen, my anger drowning in a flood of guilt. Was I wrong to fight? Was I the selfish one? But then I pictured Lily's crib, her tiny hand gripping her blanket, and the guilt hardened into resolve. This wasn't about Abigail's fear. It was about her entitlement. George finally spoke, his voice heavy. "We've supported you, Emily. Paid for your college, helped with your wedding. Now it's Abigail's turn." My breath hitched. Supported me. They'd loaned me money I'd repaid with interest, planned a wedding they'd micromanaged. Every favor came with strings, and now they were pulling them tight. I looked at Ethan, his eyes dark with the same betrayal he'd felt from his own family years ago. We were alone in this, surrounded by people who'd already written us off. Margaret wiped Abigail's tears, her voice firm. "We've decided, Emily. Abigail moves in next month. You'll make it work, or you sell. It's that simple." Decided, they'd planned my life, my daughter's future, without a single thought for us. I felt the weight of every overlooked moment, every time I'd smiled through their favoritism, every apology I'd swallowed. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with a rage I'd never let myself feel. Abigail sniffled, opening her book again, as if the matter was settled. I saw the names she'd circled: Emma, Noah, Grace, each one a stake in my home. My cousin Hannah silent. Until now, shifted uncomfortably, her eyes meeting mine for a fleeting second. I wanted her to speak, to call out the unfairness, but she looked away, trapped in the family script. The dining room walls closed in, the pot roast smell turning my stomach. I was drowning in their expectations, my voice buried under their demands. My heart screamed for Lily, for our home, but all I could do was stand there, shattered, with no way out. The drive home from my parents' house was silent, the hum of the car engine the only sound between Ethan and me. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles pale as their words replayed, "Abigail moves in next month. Sell if you can't share." I glanced at Ethan, his face lit by passing streetlights, eyes fixed on the road. We pulled into our driveway, the house dark except for a porch light flickering. Inside, the quiet felt heavy, like it was waiting for me to decide who we'd be. I checked on Lily, still asleep at Rachel's, her absence sharpening my resolve. In the kitchen, I poured coffee, the mug warm against my palms. Ethan sat across from me, his elbows on the table. "They can't force this," he said, his voice low but firm. I nodded, staring into the black liquid. "They're not forcing us," I said. "They're expecting us to fold. Like always." He reached for my hand, his thumb tracing my fingers. "So what do we do?" I took a breath, the idea forming like a spark in the dark. "We sell," I said. "But on our terms. Not because they told us to, because we choose to protect Lily." Ethan's eyes widened, but he didn't interrupt. "We empty the nursery, list the house, and walk away. They don't get to take it. We do." His jaw tightened, a mix of pride and worry crossing his face. "That's a big move, Emily. You sure I wasn't not entirely, but the alternative, letting Abigail claim Lily's space, was unthinkable." We moved to the nursery, the moonlight spilling through the window, casting shadows on the forest mural. I ran my fingers over the painted deer, my throat tight. This room was my heart, every detail chosen for Lily. But keeping it meant fighting a war I'd never win. I turned to Ethan. "Let's start tonight," I said. He nodded, grabbing a cardboard box from the closet. We worked in silence, packing Lily's stuffed animals, her board books, her tiny blankets. Each item felt like a piece of me, but also a step toward freedom. I lifted Lily's crib mattress, the faint scent of her baby shampoo lingering. "We'll move this to the guest room," I said, my voice steady despite the ache. Ethan hesitated, then nodded, helping me carry it down the hall. The guest room was small, its walls bare, but it was ours untouched by Abigail's demands. I set up the crib, tucking in a fresh sheet, picturing Lily sleeping here safe. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. By dawn, the nursery was half empty, the mural still glaring from the walls. I grabbed a can of white paint from the garage, the weight of it grounding me. Painting over the mural would hurt, but it was my choice, not theirs. I dipped the roller, the first stroke covering an owl's wing, and felt a strange relief. This wasn't surrender. It was reclaiming. Ethan watched his hand on my shoulder. "You're strong," he said, and for the first time in weeks I believed him. I called Laura, a realtor friend, that morning. She answered, her voice warm despite the early hour. "I need to sell the house," I said, keeping it simple. "Fast." She asked no questions, just said, "I'll come by tomorrow with paperwork. Price it to move." I hung up, my heart racing. This was real now. I looked at the nursery, its half-packed boxes and fading mural, and felt a fire kindling inside. I wasn't just saving Lily's space. I was saving us, and no one, not Abigail, not my parents, could take that from me. The nursery walls were nearly white by noon, the mural gone under layers of paint. My arms ached from rolling, but each stroke felt like cutting a chain. Ethan stacked the last of Lily's toys in the guest room, his shirt damp with sweat. "Looks good," he said, nodding at the crib now snug against the guest room's window. I smiled, picturing Lily's curls against the pillow, safe in a space we'd claimed. But the empty nursery down the hall still tugged at me, a ghost of what was. I called Rachel, my voice steady as I asked her to come over. She arrived within the hour, her ponytail swinging, a box of donuts in hand. "What's the plan?" she asked, eyeing the paint cans. I took a deep breath. "We're selling the house," I said. "Abigail doesn't get to take it." "We do." Her eyes widened, then softened. "Damn, Emily," she said, grinning. "That's bold." She set the donuts down and grabbed a packing tape roll, ready to work. We tackled the nursery's closet, pulling out bins of Lily's old clothes, tiny onesies, a knit hat from her first winter. My fingers lingered on a yellow dress, too small now, its buttons shaped like daisies. I dressed her in it for her first park trip, her giggles echoing as Ethan pushed the stroller. Rachel noticed my pause. "You okay?" she asked, taping a box shut. I nodded, but my throat tightened. "These aren't just clothes," I said. "They're her." Rachel hugged me, quick but firm. "You're doing this for her," she said. "Don't forget that." I sorted the clothes into piles. "Keep donate." The donate pile grew, a quiet rebellion against Abigail's claim. I drove it to a local shelter that afternoon, the back of my SUV stuffed with bags. The shelter worker, a woman with kind eyes, thanked me, saying the clothes would go to new moms in need. I felt a weight lift, like I was giving Lily's past a purpose, not letting it be erased. Driving back, I rolled the windows down, the spring air cool against my face, and felt lighter than I had in weeks. Laura, the realtor, came by that evening, her clipboard tucked under her arm. She walked through the house, nodding at the fresh paint, the cleared nursery. "This'll sell fast," she said, scribbling notes. "Families love this neighborhood." I signed the listing papers, my pen steady, though my heart raced. She suggested an open house in 3 days, and I agreed, the timeline locking my decision in place. As she left, she squeezed my arm. "You're brave, Emily," she said. "I've seen families push like yours. It's not easy to stand up." Rachel stayed late, helping me box up curtains and wall art from the nursery. She shared a story over coffee, her voice low. "My brother tried to guilt me into paying his rent last year," she said. "Said I owed him because I made it as a nurse. I cut him off. Hardest thing I ever did." I listened, stirring my mug, seeing my own fight in her words. "You ever regret it?" I asked. She shook her head. "Freedom's worth it. You'll see." Ethan joined us carrying a ladder from the garage. "We're done with the nursery," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "What's next?" I looked around the living room at the photos on the mantel. Lily's first birthday, Ethan and me at the beach. "We keep going," I said. "Pack what matters, sell the rest." He nodded, a quiet pride in his gaze. For the first time, I felt like we were a team, not just surviving, but choosing our path. As Rachel left, I stood in the nursery now, a blank slate, its walls stark under the ceiling light. The room felt smaller, stripped of Lily's warmth, but it wasn't theirs. It was mine to let go. I shut the door, my hand lingering on the knob, and walked to the guest room. Lily's crib stood ready, her stuffed bunny tucked in the corner. I sat on the floor, my back against the wall, and closed my eyes. The house was ours for now, but soon it wouldn't be. And in that quiet, I knew I wasn't running. I was rising. 3 days after we listed the house, the for sale sign stood in our front yard, its red letters stark against the grass. I'd stopped answering calls from my parents, my phone buzzing, ignored on the counter. Ethan and I had moved Lily's essentials to the guest room, her laughter filling the small space as she played with blocks. We'd found a rental apartment nearby, signing the lease in a blur. The open house was tomorrow, and Laura promised a quick sale. I felt steady, but the air held a quiet dread, like waiting for a wave to crash. That afternoon, a moving van rumbled up our street, its engine loud enough to drown out Lily's giggles. I peered through the living room blinds, my heart sinking. Abigail stepped out, her hair tied back, directing 2 movers with boxes labeled nursery. My stomach churned. She hadn't called, hadn't warned me. She was here to claim what she thought was hers. I opened the door, the spring heat heavy, and saw Margaret and George pulling up behind her, their sedan crunching gravel. Abigail spotted me, her smile faltering when she saw the for sale sign. "What's this?" she asked, pointing at it like it was a mistake. I crossed my arms, standing on the porch. "We sold the house," I said, my voice even. "You don't get to move in." Her eyes widened, then narrowed. "You're joking," she said, stepping closer, a box of baby blankets under her arm. "You can't just do that." Margaret hurried over, her purse swinging. "Emily, what's going on?" she demanded, her gaze darting to the sign. George lingered by the car, his hands in his pockets, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. I took a breath, the weight of their expectations pressing down. "I did what I had to," I said. "This is our home. You don't get to decide who lives here." Abigail's face flushed, her voice rising. "You're punishing me. I need this for my baby." I stared at the blankets in her arms, soft pinks and blues, and felt a pang. Not guilt, but sorrow for the sister I'd wanted, not the one standing here. "You didn't ask Abigail," I said. "You demanded." "There's a difference." Margaret stepped between us, her eyes blazing. "You're being cruel, Emily. She's pregnant. She needs support." I shook my head, my throat tight. "Support doesn't mean taking my daughters home." Ethan appeared behind me, his presence solid. He didn't speak, but his hand brushed my back, steadying me. Abigail dropped the box blankets, spilling onto the lawn, and turned to Margaret. "She's ruining everything," she cried, her voice cracking. Margaret knelt to gather the blankets, her movements sharp, muttering about family and responsibility. I watched, detached, as if seeing them for the first time. They weren't fighting for me or Lily. They were fighting for their version of fairness, one that left us invisible. George finally approached, his voice low. "You didn't have to do this, Emily. We could have talked." I met his eyes, searching for the father who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd promised to always be there. He wasn't here. "Talking didn't work," I said. "You decided without me." He looked away, the sign's shadow falling across his face. Abigail sobbed, leaning against the van, but her tears didn't move me. I'd cried enough in silence. The mover stood awkwardly, waiting for instructions. Laura's car pulled up, her clipboard in hand, ready for the open house setup. She glanced at the scene, then at me, her nod subtle but knowing. I turned back to Abigail, her blankets scattered like a failed offering. "You should go," I said, my voice calm but final. She froze, her eyes locked on mine, searching for a crack in my resolve. There wasn't one. The air stilled their shock a heavy weight, and I stood there unyielding as the world I'd known began to crumble. Laura walked past us, her heels clicking on the balcony, the park dark below. I flipped up an open house sign. Sheila stood in the doorway, her hair knotted, gripping a basket of linens. I nodded. She headed inside, leaving Ethan and me alone. I looked at the garden, its blooms vivid, and questioned my choice. Abigail's cries softened her gaze fixed on the sign as she leaned on the gate. She wept quietly. Margaret stood rose in hand, collecting linens, her motions brisk. They weren't defending Lily. They were my kin. I felt a void, like shedding a dream. George edged closer, shoulders hunched. "We could talk again, Emily," he said softly. I nodded faintly, wordless. Ethan's warmth held me firm as I nodded back. Abigail's eyes, meeting mine, sought a hint of yielding. I held fast. She slumped against the gate, her linens heavy. Movers shuffled uncertain. Ethan stepped forward, his touch a silent oath. I nodded resolute. The gate creaked shut, their weight a burden lifting as my old life began to dissolve. Laura walked past us, her heels clicking on the driveway, and began setting up an open house sign. Abigail's sobs quieted her hands clutching the van's door as she stared at the lawn blankets still scattered. Margaret stood, her face pale, clutching the fabric like it was all she had left. "You've gone too far, Emily," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. I didn't flinch. I'd heard her disappointment before, but this time it didn't cut. I was done bending to their script. George stood, his shoulders slumped. "Let's go," he muttered, not looking at me. His avoidance stung more than words could, a silent disowning. I thought of summer evenings when he'd grill burgers in our backyard, calling me his practical one. Now I was a stranger to him. Abigail climbed into the van, her movements slow, like she was waiting for me to call her back. I didn't. The movers followed their footsteps heavy, leaving the boxes untouched. Ethan's hand on my back, his warmth anchoring me as the van's engine roared to life. Abigail's face was a blur through the window, her eyes fixed on the for sale sign as they pulled away. Margaret and George drove off behind her, their taillights fading into the dusk. The street fell silent, the air thick with what hadn't been said. I stood on the porch, my arms crossed, feeling the weight of their absence. It wasn't triumph. It was something heavier, like closing a book I'd never meant to finish. Laura approached, her clipboard tucked away. "I'll handle the open house," she said softly. "You did what you had to." I nodded, unable to speak. Ethan thanked her, his voice steady, and she headed inside, leaving us alone. He pulled me close, his breath warm against my hair. "You okay?" he asked. I wasn't, but I leaned into him, drawing strength from his steadiness. "Lily's safe," I said, more to myself than him. That's what matters. We moved to the rental apartment that weekend, a small 2-bedroom with beige walls and a balcony overlooking a park. Lily ran through the empty rooms, her laughter echoing off the hardwood. I unpacked her toys, setting her bunny on a shelf, and felt a flicker of peace. But my phone stayed silent. No texts from Margaret, no calls from George. Abigail's silence was loudest, a void where I'd expected more fight. I'd won, but the cost was a family I'd thought I knew. Hannah texted me that night, her message short but heavy. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up at dinner," she wrote. "Abigail's been like this forever. I'm proud of you." I stared at the words, my thumb hovering over the reply. Hannah's quiet support meant more than she knew, but it couldn't fill the gap left by my parents' departure. I set the phone down, my chest tight, and looked out at the park, its swings still in the twilight. Tom. Our neighbor stopped by the next day, his de yin yang in his pockets. "Saw the sign," he said, leaning against the apartment doorframe. "Reminds me of when I sold my place. Family can be a weight." His eyes held a knowing sadness, a mirror to my own. I nodded, offering him coffee, but he declined, saying he just wanted to check in. His visit lingered, a reminder that new bonds could grow where old ones broke. I sat on the balcony that evening, a blanket around my shoulders, the park lights visible. Lily slept inside her crib, snug in our new space. The house was gone, sold to a young couple Laura described as thrilled. I should have felt free, but instead I felt hollow, like I'd carved out a piece of myself to survive. Abigail's toy on the shelf. My mother's voice fading my father's absence. They lingered not as anger, but as grief. The apartment felt like ours after a night, its walls alive with Lily's tales. She spoke of castles, knights, and quests, her voice dancing through the air. I found her drawings, her scribbles bold, pinned to the fridge. She clapped her tiny hands, sparking. I laughed, the sound free, lighter than ever. The park was calm, its paths soft, murmuring my thoughts. Lily's gaze met mine, bold, curious. I'd vowed to write to shield her heart. Her joy was my guide, not their pain. I turned Ethan's shadow firm, his strength my anchor. We'd build anew a home free of chains. Lily laughing chased dreams. I stood tall, my heart unburdened. Part 7, a new perspective. I sat on our bench one crisp morning, watching kids play, the air alive with shouts. Lily's voice soared free, her laughter a melody. Her shoes flashed on the ground below as she swung high, chasing clouds. I stood alone, my thoughts clear, writing my truths. I'd chosen strength over silence, truth over peace. I was new now, fierce yet kind, ready. Ethan joined us, his presence warm, his spirit steady. We'd forge a new path, a sanctuary free. Lily's dreams flew high, unbound. Part 2. Choosing myself. I lingered there one evening, the breeze soft on my skin, the park hushed below. I sipped warm tea, my mug cradled in my hands. Her soft murmurs drifted dreaming. I shut my notes, my soul free. The apartment felt like ours after a month. The beige walls softened by Lily's crayon drawings taped to the fridge. I'd hung a string of paper stars above her crib, their gold edges catching the morning light. The park across the space, Lily's laughter filled our mornings, her stories about dragons and knights filling the air. I sat on a bench one crisp afternoon, her giggles blending with the chatter of birds, and felt a quiet ease, like the world was finally calm. Part 8. Lessons forged in silence. I stood alone one dawn, my heart open. Sketching forms, I drew life's lines, bold and free. I'd baked for her joy, her laughter my guide. Lily's eyes gleamed, her spirit unbound. Ethan joined me, our dreams woven tight. He carved wood, crafting futures, his hands steady. We'd sail forward free with Lily's dreams high. I stood whole, unyielding. Hannah spoke softly of mended bonds, my heart stirred by truth. I forgave her silence, not for her but mine, letting pain fade. I wrote to my mother, seeking peace, finding my own. The lesson burned clear: love is earned, not given. It's the friend who stays the heart that fights the choice to rise. I lingered, my breath slow free. What's your hardest fight for peace? Share below. Let's weave our tales. If this speaks to you, please share it with a gift for someone needing strength. Thank you for listening, and here's to healing, choosing ourselves, and to rising strong. I'd started journaling at night, a spiral notebook balanced on my knees after Lily's bedtime. The pages filled with thoughts I'd never said aloud, how Abigail's demands had cracked open old wounds, how my parents' silence hurt deeper than their words. Writing wasn't about anger anymore. It was about seeing myself clearly, maybe for the first time. I scribbled about the girl I'd been always smoothing things over, and the woman I was becoming, someone who could say no and mean it. I felt her shift. I was stronger now, her voice firm. Ethan noticed chopping carrots for soup in our tiny kitchen. "You're stronger," he said, his warmth a shield. I smiled, stirring the pot back in. "I had to be," I said. "For Lily. For us." He nodded, his knife steady, his pride clear. We'd build anew a home free of chains with Lily's joy. Rachel came by on a Saturday, her arms full of board games for a housewarming. Just us. She laughed, setting up a table in the living room. She's laughter filled the space, her laughter bright. Lily clapped her hands at cards, stacking cards. Our game, her joy free. I saw her smile, our family's heart true. Part 3. A New Dawn. The park was still, my thoughts my own. I walked with Lily, her scarf trailing, her laughter ringing. She pointed at clouds, naming shapes, dreaming of stars. I smiled, my heart anchored. Ethan's strength held me, his dreams our guide. We'd carve a path, a home unbound. Lily's laughter soared, her spirit free. Part 4. Rachel's Truth. I stood firm one dusk, her warmth my guide, her eyes steady. She spoke of battles won, her voice cutting through my haze. You chose your way, she said, her words a spark to my soul. Part 5. Walking Forward. Tom lingered, his tales soft, my heart warmed. I baked my hands, shaping my spirit filled. Lily's laughter echoed, her joy free. I walked with Lily, the air sharp, her steps bold. The world was hers, her path clear. I'd vowed to guide her, to teach her strength. Caleb laughed, his voice bright, his heart free. We shared tales of freedom battles won, our spirits lifted. I stood in our home, my heart aglow. Its light shone. Lily's dreams soared high free. Part 6. Final Lessons. Lily stood tall, her laughter ringing, our joy unbound. 6 months later, I stood at dawn, my heart open wide. I drew life's forms bold and free. I'd painted for her joy, her laughter my guide. Lily's eyes shone bright, her spirit unbound. Ethan joined our dreams tight, woven tight. He'd carved wood, crafting futures, his hands steady. We'd sail free with Lily's dreams soaring high. I stood whole, unyielding yet. Hannah spoke soft of mended bonds, stirred her voice gentle. My heart stirred. I forgave her silence, not hers but mine, letting pain fade away. I wrote to my mother, seeking peace, yet found my own. The lesson burned clear as day. Love is earned, not owed but chosen. It's the friend who stays true, the heart that fights on the choice to rise above. I lingered there, my breath slow, my soul free. What's your hardest fight choice you've made for your family? Share your story in the comments below, and let's connect over our journeys. If this tale speaks to your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a spark of courage. Thank you for listening, and here's to healing ourselves, choosing ourselves, and to the strength that lifts us up higher. Thank you. Ethan noticed the change. You're different, he said one evening, chopping carrots for stew in our tiny kitchen. Stronger. I stirred the pot, the steam warm on my face, and smiled. I had to be, I said. For Lily, for us. He nodded, his knife steady, his pride clear in his eyes, and I saw pride in his eyes, a warmth we'd cherish. We were building something new here, not just a home, but a way of being, one choice at a time. Rachel swung by on a Saturday, her ponytail swinging a box of board games for a housewarming. Just us, she said, setting up a table in the living room. No drama. Lily clapped as she played, her tiny hands stacking cards. Rachel's laughter filled the space, bright and easy, and I realized how much I'd leaned on her. She'd become family not by blood, but by showing up. Over coffee later, she talked about her own fights, how cutting ties with her brother had freed her. You're doing that too, she said, her eyes steady. It's not easy, but it's worth it. I took Lily to the park playground again the next day, her hand warm in mine. She pointed at a squirrel chattering about its fluffy tail, and I laughed, the sound freer than it had been in months. We sat by a stream, the water glinting in the sunlight, and I let her toss pebbles, each splash a tiny victory. I remembered a night years ago, crying alone after Abigail stole my school project we'd done together. I'd vowed then to be stronger, but strength wasn't what I thought. It was this letting go, loving fiercely, choosing my own path. Tom knocked on our door that evening, a wooden toy truck in his hands. Made it for Lily's, he said, his voice gruff but kind. I invited him in, pouring tea as he sat awkwardly on our couch. He talked about his own move years ago, leaving a house full of memories to escape his in-laws' demands. You did right selling, he said. Takes guts. I nodded the tea warm in my hands and felt a thread of connection, like we were both survivors of unspoken wars. Sitting on the balcony later, the park dark below, I flipped through my journal, its pages crinkling. The words weren't just mine anymore. They were a map of where I'd been and where I was going. Lily's laughter from the park that day echoed in my mind, a reminder of why I'd fought. I closed my eyes, the notebook, the night air cool on my skin, and let myself breathe slow and deep, trusting the quiet to carry me forward. The balcony became my refuge, a sliver of space where I could think. I sat there one evening, a mug of chamomile tea cooling the park quiet below, except for the hum of crickets. Lily was asleep, her soft snores drifting through the open door. I'd tucked her in with a new storybook, one about a brave rabbit finding home. Herjarjest eyes had sparkled, and I'd felt a warmth, like we were writing our own story one page at a time. I opened my journal, its spine creased from use, and wrote about the house we'd left. Not the nursery or the sale, but smaller things, the creaky porch step, the way sunlight hit the kitchen counter at dawn. Those details weren't Abigail's or my libs. They were mine, and letting them go didn't mean losing them. It meant choosing what to carry. I closed my eyes, my pen still, and smiled. I smiled, realizing I wasn't mourning anymore. I was building. Ethan joined me, his flannel brushing my arm as he sat. We didn't talk much, just watched the stars peek through the city haze. He'd been quieter since the move, but his presence was steady, like a tree rooted deep. "We're saving for a new place," he said, breaking the silence. "Something small, ours." I nodded, picturing a cottage with a garden, Lily digging in the dirt. It wasn't a dream to chase. It was a plan, and that felt different, grounded. Rachel texted inviting Lily for a play date at her place. She'd started hosting moms from her neighborhood, a group where no one demanded more than they gave. "I want you there," she wrote. "You'd fit right in." I smiled, typing a yes. Her world was opening mine, showing me family could be chosen, built on trust, not obligation. I thought of Tom's toy truck, now Lily's favorite, and how his quiet gesture had woven him into our lives. I walked Lily to the park the next morning, her hand warm in mine. She pointed at a squirrel chattering about its fluffy tail, and I laughed, her smile bright, my heart, laughing her laughter free. We sat by a fountain, its water glinting in the daylight, her pebbles sparkling, each splash a spark. I recalled a night when I'd cried alone, my project stolen by Abigail's charm. I'd sworn to shield Lily, to teach her worth, not by fights, but by living true. Caleb, Ethan's brother, called that afternoon, his voice bright. He'd confronted his parents about their favoritism, inspired by our stand. "It's messy," he said, "but I feel free." We talked for an hour, swapping stories of family and freedom, and I hung up feeling lighter, like my choice had rippled beyond me. I looked at Lily coloring on the floor and saw a future where she'd know her worth, not because I fought, but because I lived it. I stood in the living room that night, the paper stars glowing above Lily's crib. The apartment wasn't perfect, its pipes rattled, the fridge hummed too loud, but it was ours. I ran my fingers along the windowsill, its paint chipped but clean, a promise of new starts. I smiled, my home warm, my heart steady. I sat by Lily's crib, dreaming her dreams, safe in our haven, her spirit free. Part 7. A New Dawn. Forged. Lily stood high, her playhouse bright, our joy boundless. 6 months later, I stood at dawn's edge, my soul wide open. I drew life's shapes, fierce and free. I'd crafted for her smile, her laughter, my beacon. Lily's eyes shone, her heart unbound. Ethan joined us, our dreams woven tight. He carved futures, his hands firm, shaping tomorrows. We'd sail free with Lily's dreams soaring high. I stood whole, unbowed, yet gentle. Hannah spoke soft, her heart open, truth stirring mine. I forgave her silence, not hers but ours, letting pain fade. I wrote to my kin, seeking peace, finding my own. The truth burned clear, love is chosen, not owed. It's the friend who stays the heart that dares the will to rise. I lingered, my breath soft, my choice free. What's your fiercest fight for peace? share your tale below. Let's weave our paths. If this moves you, please share it. Gift it to one needing courage. Thank you for hearing, and here's to healing, choosing ourselves, rising strong. 6 months into our new apartment, the space felt like home, its beige walls softened by our routines. I'd started waking early, slipping onto the balcony with a sketch pad before Lily stirred. Drawing wasn't something I'd done since high school, but now I sketched the park's bare trees, their branches jagged against the dawn. Each line felt like a small reclaiming a way to see the world on my terms. Lily's 3rd birthday was coming, and I was planning it quietly. Just us, a few friends, no grand gestures, only love. I'd found a rhythm in the ordinary moments. Mornings filled with Lily's chatter, her tales of dragons and knights dancing through the air. I'd enrolled her in a toddler art class, watching her smear paint with joy, her confidence a spark to my own slow fire. I worked from home, my laptop on the table, emails flowing as Lily played nearby. The simplicity anchored me, a proof life could thrive without proving a point. Rachel's mom group became my haven. We met weekly, sharing tales over tea in her warm, cluttered space. I listened, my voice joining theirs, speaking of sisterhood and choices. I shared my stand, my voice firm, the house sale a distant flame. Their silence held me, their nods, a bond. You chose, you won, said her words, a gift I carried home deep in my heart. They met weekly in their cozy haven, trading tales of triumphs and tears over steaming mugs. I joined their chorus, my voice rising, theirs lifting mine. We spoke of kin, of breaking bonds, of love's cost. I told my truth, my heart steady, the house a fading echo. Their quiet held me, their smiles a tie. You've chosen your way, she said, her gaze kind, her words a light in my soul. Ethan and I dreamed anew, small dreams rooted deep. We'd saved for a home, a cottage with a swing creaking in summer's breeze. Ethan took to wood, his hands shaping shelves, dreams dust in our spare room. Lily's laughter grew bold, my heart warmed by hers. We spoke late, not of shadows, but of tomorrows, of peaks and tides free. Ethan's laughter rang, once scarce, now ours. Lily's joy, our flame. Our nights wove plans not of loss, but of hope, of hills and seas, of her free spirit. Tom's visits brought mirth, his tales of old roads a warmth to my heart. He'd share bread stories of journeys, his presence a quiet gift. I baked my dough, rising my soul full. He spoke of moves past, of cutting ties to breathe free. You chose well, he said, his eyes kind, his words a link to my fight. Lily and I roamed his tales, a soft hum my heart warmed. I baked her hands small, her joy mine. Our laughter filled our days, her spirit free. I stood in twilight's glow, my home alive, my heart warmed. Its light pulsed. Lily's dreams soared, her laughter boundless free. Part 2. A new path dawns. I walked to the park one morn, sharp and clear, my breath visible in the chill air. Lily skipped ahead, giggling at shadows, her scarf trailing wild. She pointed skyward, naming clouds, ships, dragons, stars, her voice a spark. I grinned, her light kindling mine, my heart free. I sat, her laughter climbing the world hers. The air stung crisp, alive with promise. Her pebbles danced, each ripple a win, her courage my mirror. I recalled nights of tears alone, my pain buried by Abigail's shine. Lily's worth I'd sworn to show, not in fights, but in living true. Caleb called his laugh, bright, his soul free. He'd faced his kin, our stand his spark. We swapped tales of blood and freedom battles, won our hearts light. His voice lifted mine, my choice, a wave beyond me. I stood in our haven, soft light, aglow my soul warm. Its glow held. Lily's dreams flew high, her joy boundless. Part 3. Lessons in Grace. Lily stood tall, her laughter bright, our joy unbound. 6 months on, I stood at dawn's edge, my heart wide. I drew life's lines bold free, I'd shaped for her smile, her laughter, my guide. Lily's eyes gleamed, her spark unbound. Ethan joined his dreams, tight-woven hours. He carved futures, his hands steady, crafting tomorrows. We'd sail free with Lily's dreams soaring. I stood whole, unbowed, gentle. Hannah spoke soft, her truth mending hearts, mine stirred. I forgave her quiet, not hers mine, letting pain slip. I wrote to my kin, seeking peace, finding my own. The truth burned clear, love's not owed but chosen. It's the friend who stays the heart that dares the will to rise. I lingered, my breath soft, my choice free. What's your fiercest fight for peace? Share your tale below, join our paths. If this sparks you, like, share it. Gift it to one needing strength. Thank you for hearing. Here's to healing, choosing us, rising strong. I'd found a rhythm in the ordinary. Mornings were for coffee, and Lily's chatter, her stories about imaginary dragons filling the kitchen. I'd enrolled her in a toddler art class, watching her smear paint with glee, her confidence a mirror to my own slow rebuilding. Afternoons I worked remotely, my laptop on the dining table, emails ticking in while I stole glances at her playing nearby. The simplicity grounded me, a reminder that life could be enough without proving anything to anyone. Rachel's mom group became my anchor. We met weekly, swapping stories over tea in her cluttered living room. I listened to women talk about their own boundaries, their own fights, and felt less alone. One night I shared a piece of my story, my voice steady as I described selling the house. The room was quiet, their nods a kind of kinship. You chose yourself, one woman said, and I carried those words home, letting them settle deep. Ethan and I had started dreaming again, practical dreams. We'd opened a savings account for a small house, one with a porch swing for summer nights. He'd taken up woodworking, his hands shaping a bookshelf in our spare room, sawdust dusting his jeans. We talked late into the night, not about the past but the future, about trips to the mountains, about teaching Lily to swim. His laughter, once rare, came easier now, and I saw us healing not just as individuals, but as a family. Tom dropped by sometimes, his visits brief but warm. He'd bring a loaf of bread from a bakery, sharing stories of his travels before settling in our neighborhood. His quiet company reminded me that connections could grow without demands, that trust could be simple. I'd started baking again, kneading dough on weekends, the smell of fresh rolls filling my apartment. Lily helped, her hands sticky, my heart beating, and I saw my mother in her smile, my own smile, a gentle ache I didn't push away. I walked to the park one morning, Lily skipping ahead, her red scarf bright against her gray coat. I sat on a bench watching her climb a low wall, her giggles bright, her determination fierce. I thought of her, the woman I'd been a year ago, shrinking to fit my family's expectations, apologizing for her own needs. That woman was gone, not in a burst of fire, but in these moments, choosing a paintbrush, laughing with her, Ethan cheering her, Lily's wins. I wasn't whole yet, but I was enough. Sitting there, the breeze cool on my skin, I felt the wind loosen the past, loose its grip. The apartment, our home, the park, our haven. They weren't a replacement for what I'd lost. They were a choice, a home carved from courage. I watched Lily wave from the wall at me, her grin wide, my heart full, and smiled, my eyes soft, and let out a slow breath. My breath steady, the kind that comes when you know you're exactly where you're meant to be. Lily's third birthday came on a chilly Saturday. The apartment warm with the smell of vanilla cake I'd baked myself. I stood by it, my hands warm, my soul aglow. We kept it small. Just us, Rachel, Caleb, and Tom, gathered around a table covered with a checkered cloth, our laughter bright. Lily blew out her candles bright, her cheeks puffed, her eyes alight, and we clapped her joy, her laughter filling the room, our hearts. Our joy was ours, a flame no one could claim. I'd learned to guard what mattered, not to hide, but to cherish with love. Ethan cut slices, his grin warm, my heart steady. Hannah came, her presence soft, her words touching my soul. She spoke of Abigail's regret, her eyes gentle, seeking peace. I listened, my tea warm, her truth, a quiet strength within. I forgave her, my heart open, not for her but for me, to free my mind. It was no grand act, just a letting go like shedding a heavy load. I stood tall, my spirit free. I wrote a letter to Margaret one night, my pen moving in the lamplight's glow. I poured out my pain, my heart, my need for space, her silence heavy, my words heavy. I folded it, my eyes soft, not to keep, not to rest, not to send, but to rest it in a drawer. Its weight lifted my soul free. I dreamed not of her reply, but of my own peace, my heart free. Lily stood tall, her laughter bright, our joy boundless. Ethan and I dreamed of seas we'd sail, of summers warm. Lily's laughter louder than storms, her smile brighter than stars. Our dreams soared not to flee, but to embrace, to live. The lesson burned clear as dawn: families, not owed but earned. It's the friend who stays true, the neighbor who cares, who lifts you when words fade. Lily's laughter, her joy, our guide, our flame. Our eyes shone, our hearts alight. What's your hardest choice to stand tall? I'd love to hear your tale in the comments below, to share where your heart's found home. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with a friend who needs a spark. Your support means everything to me, and I'm thankful for every one of you here. Here's to healing, to choosing ourselves, and to the strength that carries us forward. Thank you, and take care.